The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Tom Bradley stepped onto the polished floor of the most famous school in the galaxy. Everything around him gleamed like crystal, and the walls seemed to pulse with a gentle blue light. Students walked past him in perfect lines, each one different from the last. Some had scales that changed color as they moved, others floated a few inches off the ground. A few looked like walking trees with silver bark. Tom adjusted his backpack and tried not to stare. Back on Earth, his teachers had warned him about this moment. He was the first human ever accepted into the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies. No pressure at all. A tall figure approached him. It had 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. When it spoke, its voice came from somewhere in its chest. "You must be the human student. I am Administrator Bex. Welcome to our institution." Tom nodded. "Thank you. I'm Tom Bradley. Follow me to your dormitory assignment. You will share quarters with 3 other students from different worlds. This is standard procedure for all new arrivals." They walked through corridors filled with impossible sights. Students were reading books that floated in the air. Others had their heads connected to glowing devices that fed information directly into their minds. In one room, Tom saw creatures that looked like living clouds solving math problems by changing their shape. "Your roommates have been informed of your arrival," Bex continued as they reached a door marked with symbols Tom couldn't read. "Quinn is from the crystal worlds of Andros. Rax comes from the gas giant Methus. Neela represents the plant civilizations of the verdant systems." The door slid open, and Tom got his first look at where he would live for the next year. The room was divided into 4 sections, each designed for a different type of being. One corner had what looked like a garden bed filled with rich, dark soil. Another area was filled with a thick yellow gas that moved slowly like honey. The third section contained tall crystal formations that hummed with energy. The fourth section looked almost normal by comparison. It had a bed, a desk, and a small storage area. Human furniture, Tom realized with relief. "Tom Bradley, meet your roommates," Beck said. Quinn emerged from the crystal section. They looked like a walking diamond, about Tom's height, with light dancing inside their body. When they moved, tiny rainbow patterns played across the walls. Rax appeared next, wearing what looked like a spacesuit filled with swirling gas. Through the helmet, Tom could see eyes like glowing coals and what might have been a smile. Neela was the easiest to understand. She looked like a person made of bark and leaves, with flowers blooming and fading in her hair as Tom watched. "Welcome, Tom Bradley," Quinn said. Their voice sounded like wind chimes. "We are curious about human customs." "Yeah, me too," Tom said. "I mean about all of your customs." Bex left them alone to get acquainted. Tom learned that his roommates had been at the academy for different lengths of time, but all of them followed the same daily routine. They woke, at the same time, attended classes in the same order, and ate their meals according to a precise schedule. "Nutrition is delivered 3 times per day," Neela explained. "Morning supplements at 0800, midday nutrients at 1200, and evening sustenance at 1800. Each meal is perfectly calculated for our individual biological needs." She showed Tom a small device on his desk. "This is your nutrition dispenser. Press the button, and it will provide exactly what your human body requires. No waste, no excess, no inefficiency." Tom pressed the button. A small panel opened, and out came what looked like a gray cube about the size of a dice. It had no smell and felt slightly warm. "That's it?" Tom asked. "That is your complete nutritional requirement for the next 8 hours, Rax said through his breathing apparatus. "It contains all necessary proteins, vitamins, minerals, and energy sources. Very efficient." Tom bit into the cube. It tasted like cardboard, if cardboard could be slightly sweet and somehow also salty. He managed to swallow it, but his stomach immediately started rumbling in protest. "Is something wrong?" Quinn asked, their light flickering with concern. "No, no, it's fine," Tom lied. "Just different from what I'm used to." Over the next 2 days, Tom tried his best to fit in. He attended classes on advanced quantum theory, where he learned that most species had solved faster-than-light travel centuries ago. He studied galactic history and discovered that wars between worlds had been eliminated through perfect resource distribution and logical thinking. In interspecies communication, he learned that most conflicts arose from misunderstandings and that every major civilization had developed beyond the need for emotional responses to problems. Everything was efficient, everything was logical, everything was perfectly organized, and Tom was miserable. The nutrition cubes kept his body alive, but they felt like eating flavorless paste. His roommates were kind, but they didn't understand concepts like jokes or casual conversation. They spoke only when they had information to share or questions to ask. On his second night, Tom lay in his human-designed bed and stared at the ceiling. Back home, his mom would be making dinner right now. His dad would be complaining about work while setting the table. His little sister would be trying to feed vegetables to their dog under the table. The thought of his mom's cooking made his mouth water. Bacon and eggs in the morning, sandwiches for lunch with thick slices of bread and real meat, dinner with multiple courses and flavors that made him close his eyes and sigh with happiness. Tom sat up suddenly. In his luggage, wrapped carefully in his clothes, was a gift from his parents. They had insisted he bring it, even though he thought it was silly at the time. A small portable cooking unit designed for space travel. His roommates were all in their rest cycles, which meant they wouldn't wake for hours. Tom quietly unpacked his belongings until he found the device. It was about the size of a lunchbox, with simple controls and a heating element. Tomorrow morning, he decided, he was going to have a real breakfast. He had no idea that this simple decision would change the entire galaxy. The alarm woke Tom at 06:30, 30 minutes before the official wake-up time for the entire academy. His roommates were still in their rest cycles. Quinn's crystal form pulsed slowly with dim light. Rax's breathing apparatus hummed quietly in his gas-filled section. Neela's flowers had closed for the night, making her look like a sleeping tree. Tom moved carefully to avoid waking them. He had hidden his cooking supplies in his storage compartment the night before. Now he pulled them out, piece by piece. The portable cooking unit, a small pan, eggs from the emergency food supply his parents had packed, real bacon wrapped in special preservation material, bread that could be toasted, even a tiny container of coffee. Setting up the cooking unit took only a few minutes. Tom had used similar devices during camping trips with his family. The heating element glowed red, and he placed the pan on top. The first drops of oil hit the hot surface with a satisfying sizzle. That sizzle changed everything. Quinn's crystal body flickered suddenly, shifting from dim blue to bright yellow, but they didn't wake up. Instead, their light pulsed in a pattern Tom had never seen before. Tom cracked the first egg into the pan. The smell began immediately. It was a smell that every human knew from childhood, the warm, rich scent of eggs cooking in oil. But to his alien roommates, it was something completely new. Neela's closed flowers began to open, even though artificial dawn was still an hour away. Her leaves turned toward Tom's corner of the room, like she was following sunlight. Tom added the bacon to the pan. The sizzling grew louder, and a new wave of aromas filled the room, smoke and salt and the deep, satisfying smell of meat cooking over heat. Tom breathed deeply and smiled for the first time in 3 days. Rax's breathing apparatus began working, faster. The gas inside his suit swirled in tight circles, and his glowing eyes opened wide. He sat up in his rest area, staring at Tom through his helmet. "What are you doing?" Rax asked, but his voice sounded different, softer somehow. "Making breakfast," Tom said, flipping the bacon. Want some?" Before Rax could answer, more sounds came from outside their room. Footsteps in the hallway, voices speaking in languages Tom didn't recognize. But the tone was the same in every voice, confusion mixed with something else, something like hunger. Tom added bread to his toaster function and started the coffee. The smell of toasting bread joined the eggs and bacon. Then came the coffee, rich and dark and complex. The combination of scents filled not just their room, but began drifting into the hallway through the air circulation system. The footsteps outside grew more frequent. Quinn stood up, their crystal form blazing with light. "Now, Tom Bradley, what is that process you are performing?" "Cooking," Tom said, checking his eggs. "Heating food to make it taste better and easier to digest." "But why do you heat the organic matter?" Tom thought about how to explain it. "Because it tastes amazing, and it smells good, and it makes me happy." Neela had moved closer, her leaves rustling with excitement. "The chemical compounds you are releasing into the air are causing unusual responses in my system." "Good unusual or bad unusual?" "I do not know. I have never experienced anything like this before." Tom's breakfast was almost ready. He plated the eggs, bacon, and toast, then poured his coffee. The rich, warm scents filled the room completely now. But something else was happening outside. The hallway had gone quiet. Not the normal quiet of students walking to their scheduled activities. This was the quiet of many beings standing very still. Tom took his first bite of real food in 3 days and nearly groaned with pleasure. The eggs were perfect, creamy and warm. The bacon was crispy and salty. The toast crunched between his teeth, and the coffee, oh, the coffee was like drinking liquid motivation. A soft chime indicated someone was at their door. Rax moved to open it, and what Tom saw made him stop eating. The hallway was full of students, dozens of them, beings from every species he had seen since arriving. They stood in a crowd, all facing toward his room. Their eyes, when they had eyes, were focused on him. Those without eyes had their sensing organs pointed in his direction. A student who looked like a walking plant with blue leaves stepped forward. "Excuse the interruption. We detected unusual atmospheric changes coming from this location. Are you experiencing a medical emergency?" Tom looked around at his roommates, then at the crowd. Everyone was staring at his breakfast with expressions he couldn't identify. But their body language told him everything. They were all leaning forward. Slightly. Their breathing when they breathed was deeper. Several students at the back of the crowd were pushing forward, trying to get closer. "No emergency," Tom said. "Just eating breakfast." "But what is that process you performed?" asked a student with scales that shifted from green to gold. "The matter you consumed appeared to undergo transformation before ingestion." "You cooked it," Neela whispered, like she was discovering fire. "You intentionally changed the organic matter using applied heat." Tom nodded. "Yeah, that's cooking." The crowd rustled with movement. Several students spoke at once in different languages, but Tom caught similar words in each tongue. Words that seemed to translate to impossible and unprecedented and fascinating. A new figure appeared at the back of the crowd. Tom recognized the four-armed form of Administrator Bex, who was pushing through the students with growing alarm. "What is the meaning of this gathering?" Bex demanded. "All students should be preparing for morning nutrition distribution." The students parted to let Bex through, but none of them moved away from Tom's door. When Bex saw Tom sitting with his plate of food, the administrator's metallic skin changed from silver to a deep bronze color. "Human student, Tom Bradley, explain." "This situation immediately." Tom held up his fork, which still had a piece of egg on it. "I made breakfast. Would you like to try some?" The question sent a ripple through the crowd. Students began whispering in dozens of languages. Bex's skin flickered through several colors Tom had never seen before. "Try some?" Bex repeated. "Yeah, taste it. See if you like it." The hallway fell, completely silent. In that silence, Tom's stomach rumbled with satisfaction from the real food, and the sound seemed to echo like thunder. Every alien in the hallway turned to look at him with something that looked remarkably like envy. News of the incident spread through the academy faster than light-speed communications. By midday, Professor Kell had received 17 reports about the atmospheric disturbance in Dormitory Wing 7. As the academy's leading expert in biological systems, she expected to find a student suffering from metabolic breakdown or perhaps a malfunctioning nutrition dispenser. Professor Kell had 6 legs, silver fur, and compound eyes that could analyze chemical compounds just by looking at them. She had studied life forms from across the galaxy for over 2 centuries. Nothing surprised her anymore. Until she walked into Tom Bradley's dormitory wing and stopped dead in her tracks. The hallway was still full of students. They had been standing there for hours, missing their scheduled classes, ignoring their assigned activities, and completely disrupting the academy's perfect routine. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was their faces. Every species showed emotion differently, but Professor Kell had studied them all. The crystalline students from Andros were pulsing with colors that indicated deep fascination. The gas breathers from Methus had their suits cycling faster than normal, which meant excitement. The plant people showed signs of accelerated growth, with new buds appearing on their limbs. But most disturbing of all were the expressions that crossed species lines. Every student in the hallway wore the same look. Their attention was focused entirely on one doorway, and their body language suggested they were waiting for something they couldn't name. Professor Kell pushed through the crowd. "Students, explain your presence here immediately. You should all be in advanced mathematics or theoretical physics." A student from the crystalline worlds answered, "Professor, the human performed an unprecedented biological process. We are observing the results." "What process?" "He applied direct heat to organic matter before consumption." Professor Kell's compound eyes focused on the doorway. "Show me." She entered the room and found Tom Bradley sitting calmly at his desk, eating what appeared to be modified organic compounds. The chemical signatures her eyes detected were unlike anything in her database. Protein structures that had been altered by thermal application. Lipids that had undergone molecular changes due to controlled heat exposure. And underlying it all, aromatic compounds that seemed to trigger responses in every biological sensor she possessed. "Human student," she said, "explain what you have done to this organic matter." Tom looked up from his plate. "Oh, hi. I cooked breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee. My mom's recipe, sort of." "You applied heat to raw biological material?" "Well, yeah. You can't eat raw eggs or raw bacon. Well, you could, but it wouldn't taste good, and it might make you sick." Professor Kell's fur bristled with confusion. "But why would you intentionally alter the nutritional composition of your sustenance?" Tom paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Because it tastes incredible. Here, try some." He held out his fork, offering her a piece of scrambled egg. Professor Kell stared at it like he was holding a live explosive device. "You wish me to consume heated organic matter? It's just eggs. From chickens. They're birds from my planet. You consume the reproductive cells of flying creatures? When you put it like that, it sounds weird, but yeah, they're really good." Professor Kell's 6 legs shifted nervously. In her 2 centuries of life, she had never encountered anything like this situation. Her training told her that altering food through heat application was primitive and dangerous. Her scientific curiosity told her that Tom's biological readings showed no signs of distress despite consuming these modified substances. And something deeper, something she didn't recognize, told her that the aromatic compounds filling the room were triggering responses in her system that she had never experienced before. The nutritional dispensers provide all necessary biological requirements, she said, more to herself than to Tom. Heat application serves no logical purpose. Maybe not logical, Tom said, but it serves a happiness purpose. Happiness is not a nutritional requirement. Tom smiled. Maybe it should be. More footsteps echoed from the hallway. Professor Kell turned to see Dean Vorth approaching with a full security escort. The dean was a tall, thin being from a world where efficiency was the highest virtue. His people had eliminated all unnecessary biological functions thousands of years ago. They consumed pure energy and considered physical food to be a waste of time. Professor Kell, Dean Vorth said, report on the situation. The human student has applied thermal energy to organic compounds before consumption. The process appears to be intentional. Intentional food modification. The dean's voice rose in pitch, which indicated severe distress in his species. This is highly irregular. Has he contaminated other students? No contamination detected. However, the aromatic compounds produced by the thermal application are causing unusual behavioral responses in the observing students. Dean Vorth looked at the crowd in the hallway, then at Tom. Human student, cease this activity immediately. Return to standard nutritional protocols. Tom set down his fork. With respect, sir, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just eating breakfast. You are disrupting the entire academy's schedule. Classes have been abandoned. Students are ignoring their assigned duties. This cannot continue. Why? Tom asked. Because they're curious about something new? Because curiosity about inefficient biological processes serves no educational purpose. Tom stood up and walked to his window. Outside, he could see other dormitory buildings where students were visible through transparent walls, all eating their regulation nutrition cubes in perfect synchronization. You know what I see out there? Tom said. I see people who have forgotten that eating can be more than just fuel. Food isn't just about staying alive. It's about culture and family and pleasure and bringing people together. Those concepts are inefficient, Dean Vorth said. Maybe, Tom replied, but they're human. Professor Kell had been running chemical analysis on the air in the room during this conversation. Her readings showed something that made her fur stand up in shock. Dean Vorth, she said quietly, I need to speak with you privately. They stepped into the hallway, where the crowd of students immediately turned to listen. What is it, Professor? The aromatic compounds the human is producing are triggering dormant neural pathways in every species present. Dormant pathways? Pathways related to primitive feeding behaviors, pathways that our civilizations evolved beyond thousands of years ago. Dean Vorth's skin color shifted to deep purple, which meant he was thinking very hard about something disturbing. Are you suggesting that this human's primitive cooking process is awakening obsolete biological responses? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. And Dean, there's something else. The students aren't just curious, they're hungry. Not for nutrition, but for whatever the human is experiencing when he consumes that prepared food. Dean Vorth looked at the crowd of students, then back at Tom's room where the smell of coffee and bacon still lingered in the air. This is unprecedented, he said. Yes, Professor Kell agreed. It is. Neither of them noticed that students throughout the academy were beginning to abandon their afternoon classes, all of them drawn by reports of something happening in dormitory. Wing 7. Something that their perfectly efficient civilizations had never prepared them to understand. Something that smelled like home. Emergency meetings were not common at the Galactic Institute. In fact, the last one had been held over 50 years ago when a star went supernova near one of their research stations. But here was Dean Vorth, calling together every department, head, senior professor, and administrator for an urgent session about one human student's breakfast. The meeting hall filled with beings from dozens of worlds, all speaking in hushed tones about the unprecedented situation. Professor Kell had spent the afternoon running detailed scans on every student who had been exposed to Tom's cooking aromas. Her findings were disturbing enough to make even the most logical minds question everything they thought they knew about civilization. The human's thermal food preparation has triggered biological responses that we believed were extinct, Professor Kell announced to the assembled faculty. Every species tested showed activation of neural pathways related to primitive, feeding behaviors. Dean Vorth's purple skin had deepened to almost black. Explain the implications. These pathways control responses to complex aromatic compounds, social feeding behaviors, and what primitive species called appetite. They exist in our genetic code, but they've been dormant for millennia. Our nutritional science evolved beyond the need for such inefficient systems. Dr. Hex, the Academy's expert in advanced psychology, raised 3 of her arms. Are you suggesting that this human's cooking has awakened instinctual behaviors that our civilizations deliberately eliminated? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. The room filled with concerned muttering in a dozen languages. These were beings whose peoples had solved hunger, eliminated food waste, and created perfect nutritional balance. The idea that they were missing something seemed impossible. Meanwhile, back in the dormitory, Tom had finished his breakfast and was trying to study for his afternoon classes. But concentration was difficult with nearly 200 students now, gathered in the hallways outside his room. The crowd had grown throughout the day as word spread across the academy. His roommate Quinn had been asking questions for hours. Tom Bradley, explain again why the heating process improves the organic matter. It's hard to explain, Tom said for the 10th time. It changes the texture, brings out flavors, makes it smell better. It's like the difference between listening to music and just hearing random sounds. But flavor serves no nutritional purpose, Rax added from his gas-filled corner. Neither does music, Tom pointed out. But you guys have music, right? His roommates exchanged looks. Their civilizations did have music and art and literature. They had kept the things that made life beautiful, even if they served no practical purpose. So cooking is like music for food? Neela asked, her flowers brightening with understanding. Yes, exactly like that. The door chimed, and Tom opened it to find a student he hadn't seen before. She looked almost human, except for the blue tint to her skin and the fact that she had 4 arms. Hello, she said. I am Zara from the Centauri colonies. I have a question about your food preparation. Sure, what is it? My people eliminated cooking 3,000 years ago when we developed perfect nutrition synthesis. But my grandmother used to tell stories about the old days when families would gather around heat sources to prepare meals together. I thought these were just primitive myths. Tom's eyes lit up. They're not myths. Cooking is one of the oldest human traditions. Families still gather around dinner tables every night to share food and talk about their day. Every night? Well, as often as possible. It's how we stay connected. Food brings people together. More students began speaking up from the crowd. A crystalline being from Andros mentioned ancient songs about feast days. A plant person from the Verdant systems remembered old stories about seasonal gatherings where communities would prepare special foods together. Professor Kell arrived just in time to hear these conversations. What she discovered made her compound eyes widen with shock. Every species represented at the Academy had cultural memories of communal food preparation, stories, songs, and traditions that went back thousands of years before their civilizations became advanced. She pulled out her research scanner and began taking readings from the crowd. What she found challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic development. Dean Vorth, she said into her communication device. You need to see this. When the dean arrived with his security escort, he found Professor Kell studying readouts that seemed impossible. What am I looking at? He asked. Neural activity patterns that shouldn't exist. Every student here is showing heightened activity in brain, regions associated with social bonding, community formation, and cultural memory. The aromatic compounds from the human's cooking aren't just triggering hunger responses, They're awakening cultural memories that go back to the foundations of civilization itself. Tom had been listening to this conversation, and something clicked in his mind. Wait a minute. Are you saying that all of your peoples used to cook food together, but you stopped when you got more advanced? That appears to be the case, Professor Kell admitted. But why would you give up something that brought communities together? Because it was inefficient, Dean Vorth said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. Tom looked at the crowd of students in the hallway. They were all different species, from different worlds, with different biology and different cultures. But right now, they were all united by curiosity about something they had lost. What if efficiency isn't everything? Tom asked. What if some things are worth doing even if they take longer or use more energy? Such as? Such as taking time to prepare food with care, such as gathering together to eat and talk and laugh, such as creating something beautiful just because it makes people happy. A student from the back of the crowd called out, In our ancient texts, there are references to breaking bread together as a way to build trust between strangers. Another student added, My people have old ceremonies about sharing prepared food during important celebrations. Professor Kell was frantically taking notes. Dean Vorth, what we're observing here isn't just biological, it's anthropological. This humans cooking has awakened collective memories of cultural practices that every civilization abandoned in pursuit of efficiency. And the implications? The implications are that we may have optimized away something fundamental to community building and cultural bonding, something that transcends species barriers. Tom had been preparing another small meal while they talked. Just some toast with butter and jam. Simple foods, simply prepared. But as the smell drifted into the hallway, something remarkable happened. The crowd of different species, who normally grouped by their own kind, began mixing together. Crystalline students stood next to plant people. Gas breathers moved closer to energy beings. Natural enemies from different star systems found themselves standing side by side, united by their shared response to the aroma of prepared food. Look at them, Tom said quietly to Professor Kell. When's the last time you saw different species mixing like that? Professor Kell stared at the crowd with growing amazement. Never, she whispered. I have never seen anything like this. Dean Vorth's purple skin was cycling through colors rapidly now. Professor, what are you recommending? I'm recommending that we study this phenomenon immediately, and I'm recommending that we consider the possibility that our advanced civilizations may have made a serious mistake when we eliminated communal food preparation. Tom spread jam on his toast and took a bite. The simple act sent another wave of aroma into the hallway, and the crowd moved closer together, different species talking to each other for the first time in the Academy's history. Sometimes the old ways are old for a reason, Tom said, but sometimes they're just ways that work. 6 months later, the Galactic Institute looked completely different. What had once been sterile corridors filled with students rushing between efficient activities had become gathering spaces where beings from across the galaxy sat together, sharing meals and stories. Tom stood in what was now called the Cultural Nutrition Center, watching his friend Quinn carefully crack an egg into a heated pan. The crystalline being's body flashed with colors of concentration and joy as the egg began to sizzle. The thermal application is proceeding correctly, Quinn asked. Perfect, Tom said. You're getting really good at this. The center had been built in the space that used to house the automated nutrition dispensers. Instead of machines producing gray cubes, there were now cooking stations designed for different species' needs. Methane-breathing students had specialized equipment that let them prepare their gas-based nutrients with heat and flavor compounds. Plant-based students had growing chambers where they could cultivate and prepare fresh foods together. Even the energy-based beings had found ways to add complexity and social interaction to their feeding. They had created communal energy gardens, where they could absorb light together while sharing the equivalent of flavor enhancement through harmonic resonance. Professor Kell entered the center carrying a data pad filled with research results. Over the past months, she had been studying the effects of what was now called the Bradley Protocol. The findings had revolutionized their understanding of civilization itself. "Tom," she called out, "the latest reports from the Andros system just came in." Tom joined her at one of the new discussion tables, where students often sat to eat and talk together. "What's the news?" 3 more crystalline worlds have reinstated communal food preparation. Their productivity initially dropped by 12%, but their social cohesion and cultural satisfaction increased by over 300%. They're reporting the lowest crime rates and highest happiness indexes in their recorded history. Similar reports had been coming in from across the galaxy. Word of the Academy's transformation had spread to other schools, then to research stations, and finally to entire worlds. Civilizations that had eliminated cooking thousands of years ago were rediscovering it, but more than that, they were rediscovering each other. Neela approached their table carrying a plate of what she called garden fresh nutrients. They looked like colorful vegetables that had been lightly heated and seasoned with aromatic compounds. "Tom, I wanted to thank you again." "For what?" "For showing us that efficiency is not the highest goal of existence." Tom smiled. "You figured that out yourselves. I just made breakfast." Dean Vorth appeared at the entrance to the center. His purple skin had lightened to a pleasant lavender shade, which Professor Kell had learned indicated contentment. The dean had been one of the most resistant to the changes at first, but even he couldn't argue with the results. Student satisfaction was at an all-time high. Interspecies conflicts had virtually disappeared. Academic performance had initially dropped when students spent more time preparing and sharing meals, but then it had rebounded to higher levels than ever before. Students who felt connected to their communities learned better and faster. "Tom Bradley," Dean Vorth said, "I have news. Good news or bad news? The Galactic Education Council has made a decision about the Bradley Protocol. They want to implement it at every institute of higher learning in known space." Tom nearly choked on his coffee. "Seriously?" "Seriously. They're calling it the most significant educational advancement in galactic history. They want you to help train instructors in what they're calling cultural nutrition studies." "Me? Teach cooking to the entire galaxy?" "Not just cooking," Professor Kell corrected. "You're teaching community building, cultural connection, and the understanding that some aspects of existence cannot and should not be optimized away." Tom looked around the center. Hundreds of students from dozens of worlds were sitting together, eating food they had prepared with their own hands, talking and laughing and building friendships that crossed species lines. In the corner, Rax was teaching a group of plant students how to add aromatic compounds to their nutrients. Near the windows, crystalline beings were showing energy-based students how to create light patterns that enhanced the experience of communal feeding. "What happens to all the nutrition dispensers?" Tom asked. "They're being converted to emergency backup systems," Dean Vorth said, "for situations where communal food preparation isn't possible, but the goal is for every student in the galaxy to learn what you accidentally taught us, which is that bringing people together over prepared food is one of the fundamental building blocks of civilization," Professor Kell said. "Your species never forgot this. You carried it with you to the stars. And when you shared it with us, you reminded an entire galaxy what we had lost." Tom's roommate, Zara, approached the table carrying a plate of something that looked remarkably like pancakes, if pancakes were blue, and gave off a gentle glow. "Tom, I need to tell you something," she said. "I sent a message to my grandmother back on Centauri Prime. I told her about the cooking lessons and the communal meals. She cried. Happy tears or sad tears?" "Happy tears. She said she never thought she would live to see the old ways return. Her planet is planning to build community kitchens in every city. They're calling them Bradley Centers." Tom felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had started with one simple breakfast. "I don't understand how this happened. I just wanted eggs and bacon." "That's exactly why it happened," Professor Kell said. "You weren't trying to change the galaxy. You were just being human. You were homesick and wanted comfort food. But in doing something so fundamentally human, you showed us what we had given up." Tom nodded slowly. "My mom always said that the best meals are the ones shared with people you care about." "Your mother sounds very wise," Dean Vorth said. "The council wants to invite her to speak at the Galactic Education Summit next year. She'd love that. She always said I should eat more vegetables." Quinn approached with their perfectly cooked egg, glowing with pride. "Tom Bradley, I have successfully created my first thermal-modified breakfast. Will you share it with me?" "I'd be honored." As they sat down together, Tom reflected on how much had changed. The academy that had once prized efficiency above all else now celebrated the inefficient joy of cooking together. Students who had once eaten alone now gathered in groups, sharing food and stories and laughter. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some species had difficulty adapting cooking techniques to their biology. Others struggled with the concept of eating for pleasure rather than pure nutrition. But Professor Kell's research teams had worked tirelessly to develop cooking methods for every type of being. More importantly, the changes went far beyond food. Students were forming friendships across species lines. They were learning about each other's cultures through the foods they prepared together. They were discovering that despite their different biologies and homeworlds, they all shared the fundamental desire for community and connection. "Tom," Neela said, settling down at their table with her aromatic vegetables, "I have a question about human culture." "Sure, what is it?" "Do humans really gather together for meals every single day?" "Most families try to. At least for dinner, if not breakfast and lunch too." "And you discuss your daily experiences during these meals?" "Yeah, we talk about work, school, things that made us happy or worried us. We share stories and jokes. Sometimes we argue about politics or who's supposed to do the dishes." "Fascinating," Rax said, joining them with his own specially prepared gas-based nutrients. "My people used to have similar gatherings before we became technologically advanced. We called them atmosphere-sharing ceremonies." "What happened to them?" "We decided they were inefficient. Individual feeding was faster and required less coordination." Tom looked around the table at his friends from different worlds. "But you lost something when you gave that up, didn't you?" "We lost everything," Rax said quietly. "We became efficient, but we stopped being a community." Professor Kell had been recording this conversation for her research. "Tom, do you realize that similar discussions are happening at every table in this center? Students are rediscovering cultural practices that their civilizations abandoned centuries or millennia ago. And they're discovering new ones too," Tom added, watching a table where crystalline students were teaching plant-based students how to create light shows that enhance the flavors of their food. Different species are learning from each other in ways they never did before. Dean Vorth sat down with them, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago when he never took time for social interaction. "The council has asked me to establish a new field of study. They want to call it Applied Cultural Anthropology, focusing on the practical benefits of maintaining traditional community practices alongside technological advancement. Meaning we're going to study which inefficient cultural practices actually serve important psychological and social functions. The goal is to help advanced civilizations maintain their humanity, so to speak, while still benefiting from technological progress." Tom smiled. "My dad always said that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should." "Your father is also wise." As the day wound down, students began cleaning up the cooking stations together, another practice that had evolved naturally. No one was assigned to cleanup duty. but everyone participated because it felt right to take care of the spaces they had shared. Tom helped wash dishes alongside beings who had once seemed impossibly alien to him. Now they were just friends who happened to come from different worlds. "Tom," Quinn said as they dried the last of the cooking equipment, "what will you do when your exchange year ends?" Tom had been thinking about that question a lot lately. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to go home and see my family, but part of me wants to stay here and help with the new programs." "Why not do both?" Professor Kell suggested. "The Council is planning to establish cultural nutrition centers on every inhabited world. They'll need human consultants to help design them. You could travel the galaxy, teaching cooking and bringing communities together," Neela added. "Like a cultural ambassador." Tom looked around the center one more time. Students from dozens of worlds were sitting together, sharing meals and conversations, and laughter. The rigid schedules and sterile efficiency of the old academy had been replaced by something warmer and more alive. "You know what?" Tom said. "That sounds like the best job in the galaxy." 3 years later, Tom Bradley stood in front of the newly opened Cultural Nutrition Center on the planet Xerion, watching local students take their first cooking lesson. The instructor was a former academy graduate who had learned Tom's techniques and adapted them for the local species biology. Tom's portable communicator chimed with a message from his mother back on Earth. "Proud of you, sweetheart. Dad says to tell you that you've single-handedly made the galaxy a more civilized place. Dinner's waiting when you come home." Tom smiled and typed back, "Thanks, Mom. Save room for one more. I'm bringing friends." The galaxy was a bigger place than it had been when Tom first arrived at the academy, but it was also somehow smaller, connected by the simple understanding that no matter how different beings might appear on the outside, they all shared the fundamental need for community, connection, and the simple pleasure of a good meal shared with friends. And it had all started with one human who just wanted eggs and bacon for breakfast.